Yo, what's up guys? It's Noah here, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the Week 4 Monday Night Football Showdown slate on Draftkings. We got Week 4 closing out on Monday night with a game between the Seahawks and the Giants. We're going to talk through this Showdown slate, guys, like we always do. We're going to go top to bottom, kind of talk about all the playable options, all the guys that I do have interest in on this slate. As always, though, before we do get started breaking down the slate, if you guys do enjoy these DFS videos and if they do help you out, make sure you hit that like button down below. I always appreciate the likes, guys. Hit that subscribe button if you have not yet. And if you guys are new to the channel, if you have never checked out Prize Picks before, we are partnered up with Prize Picks. You guys can sign up for Prize Picks and you can use my promo code Noah. When you do sign up, you will get your first deposit matched up to $100 when you sign up for Prize Picks with my promo code. And for those of you that have never heard of Prize Picks, they are a DFS site, but they're a little bit different than DraftKings and FanDuel. On Prize Picks, it's more focused on pick'ems, so you're basically picking more or less on a player's projection, and you're basically just competing against Prize Picks projections. If you see lines that you think are too high, you can take the under, or you can take less, and if you think lines are too low, you can take the over, or more. So you can see some of the props they already have posted for Monday night's game. They have a ton of different categories you can look through. But again, guys, if you're not on Prize Picks yet, make sure to sign up. Use that promo code Noah when you do, and you will get your first deposit matched up to $100. But let's talk through this showdown slate, guys, for Monday Night Football for the Giants and the Seahawks. Man, the Giants feels like they've been on a primetime game. I want to say like 3 out of the 4 weeks this season. We've had the Giants on primetime. They're getting another primetime game on Monday night. Been a tough season for the Giants. We'll see if they can finally turn around here. But we'll start off at the top of the player pool. We'll talk about the quarterbacks first. So Geno Smith is coming in at $10K, and then Daniel Jones is coming in at $9,600. Typically on these showdown slates, the quarterbacks are almost always going to look like really good options. And I think on this slate, this is a spot where I think both quarterbacks stand out as pretty solid plays here. Geno Smith has shown a pretty high floor ever since taking over as the quarterback, starting quarterback for Seattle. Had a really good season last season. So far this season, he's been solid. Didn't have the greatest game week 1 against the Rams. Not the greatest game last week against Carolina, but did have a really big game against Detroit. I think this is a pretty good matchup against the Giants. I think this Giants defense is one that we definitely can attack. Geno Smith has plenty of weapons on the Seattle team. We know he's going to throw the ball a decent amount. Seattle will let him air it out. So I think at $10K, Geno Smith looks really solid here. Definitely in cash game consideration. Probably going to be a must for cash games. And I think for tournaments, I'm fine going to Geno Smith in tournaments. Even I could see playing him in the captain spot, but if I was going to play Geno Smith in the captain spot, you definitely want to have at least, I would think, 2 of his receivers. In order for Geno Smith to be the winning captain, you're probably going to have to hope that he spreads the ball around and doesn't really lock in on one receiver, because if he locks in on one receiver, then you're probably going to want to have that receiver in the captain spot. But we could see Geno Smith throw 3 touchdowns or maybe 4 touchdowns, and they all go to different receivers. That's a possibility. But I think Geno Smith looks really good here. He's firmly in play. And then Daniel Jones I like a lot. Really good matchups against Seattle. Jones hasn't had the easiest matchups. I mean, week 1 he had to face a really good Dallas defense. Week 3 last week he had to face a really good 49ers defense. He had a good matchup week 2 against Arizona and crushed. He had 34 DraftKings points in that game. This is another good matchup for Daniel Jones, so I would not be surprised to see him put up a big ceiling game this week. Home game as well I think helps. Seattle's defense is one you definitely can attack, you can pick on, and Daniel Jones is a pretty good fantasy quarterback. He might not be the best real-life quarterback, but for fantasy, he does offer rushing upside, so he's a guy that can go out there and put up big ceiling games. Honestly, between him and Geno Smith, I think I actually prefer Daniel Jones, but both quarterbacks look really good in this game. I think both are firmly in play. But I do want to talk about Kenneth Walker at the top because he actually is the most expensive player on the slate. Saquon Barkley is doubtful, so he's not expected to play. So Kenneth Walker is the most expensive player on the slate, $10,800. He's been super consistent so far this season. He's had a really good role, been playing on a good amount of the snaps just for the season. I mean, week 1, 63% of the snaps, week 2, 61%, and then last week, 51%. He's not getting a true workhorse type role, but I mean, he's still, week 1, he still got, 16 touches. Week 2, 18 touches. Last week, 21 touches. Even though he's only playing 55, 60% of the snaps, I mean, he's still getting 15 to 18 touches per game. The pass game usage has been okay for Kenneth Walker. It hasn't been great, but he probably will see at least 2 or 3 targets. I would like to see some more targets just because with DraftKings scoring, it's very valuable to get running backs that can catch passes just because with DraftKings scoring being full PPR, it's an easy way for running backs to rack up points with catches. You're not going to get a ton of pass game usage from Kenneth Walker, but I think the matchup's pretty good against this Giants defense. Giants defense has definitely been vulnerable on the ground this season. So Kenneth Walker firmly in play for me. I think I would prefer the quarterback straight up, but no issues going to Kenneth Walker. And then you have DK Metcalf coming in at 8,800, and Tyler Lockett is coming in at 8K. For me, when it comes to Metcalf and Lockett, I seem to always get these guys wrong. Like, whenever on the main slate, if I play DK Metcalf on the main slate, it'll be Lockett that goes off. And if I play Lockett, it'll be Metcalf that goes off. I never get these guys right. So far this season, Metcalf has been the most consistent of the two, through their 3 games. He's been solid, 13, 13, 20 DraftKings points. The targets have been pretty consistent. And then you do have Lockett, who kind of offers more of that boom-bust upside. Lockett does definitely have a lower floor than Metcalf. His targets aren't as consistent as Metcalf's are, but we did see week 2 a big ceiling game from Lockett. 8 catches, 59 yards, 2 touchdowns. Between the two, I do prefer Metcalf straight up if I had to choose. I think both Seattle receivers are in play here, but Metcalf, the targets are more consistent for Metcalf. The fantasy points per game have been there as well. I think both guys offer plenty of upside, and like I said earlier, if you're building out lineups with maybe like Geno Smith at captain, I think it makes sense to play both Lockett and Metcalf in those lineups, just because if you're assuming Geno Smith has a really big game, if he doesn't do it on the ground, he's probably doing it through the air, and it's the touchdowns are going to those guys. When Geno Smith throws for 3 touchdowns, there's a very good chance at least 1, if not 2, if not all 3 of those touchdowns are going to Metcalf and Lockett. So I definitely think both Metcalf and Lockett are firmly in play here. Again, if I had to choose one of the two, I think I do prefer Metcalf. And then you got Darren Waller at 7K. Darren Waller, has had a pretty good role so far for the Giants. Now the fantasy points, have not been there, but the opportunity's been there. The targets have been consistent, and the snaps have been pretty good as well. I mean, week 1 he only played 54% of the snaps, but that was just an outlier game. It was a massive blowout against Dallas. They lost by 40 points. Week 2 was a competitive game, and you saw Waller get up to 90% of the snaps. Last week, he played 82% of the snaps. He's going to play close to every single snap. He's going to be out there running routes. He's a really good receiving tight end. And while he's yet to have like a big game, he hasn't scored a touchdown yet. You would think that's going to change at some point. And I think this Seattle team has been kind of vulnerable against tight ends this season. I want to take a look at that real quick. So far this season, in terms of like fantasy points allowed to tight ends, Seattle has been, let's see, where are they at? I think they've been kind of like middle of the pack in terms of fantasy points. Basically like middle of the pack in terms of fantasy points allowed to tight ends. Might not be like the greatest matchup for Darren Waller, but Waller's a super talented receiver, super talented receiving tight end, and he's going to be one of the top targets in this passing game for Daniel Jones, especially not having Saquon Barkley. They might have to lean on Daniel Jones' arm even more. We might even see more pass attempts for Daniel Jones than normal. And I would expect his top target, Darren Waller, to project to see probably 7 to 8 targets here. Now, I think between like Metcalf, Lockett, Waller would definitely be third on that list for me between those 3. But you also are paying a little bit more for those Seattle receivers. Metcalf, on the other hand, Waller, on the other hand, is coming in at a little bit of a discount. So Waller's fine to go to. Not a priority for me on this slate, but I think like in tournaments, he does make a lot of sense. I think his tournament ownership probably comes in a little bit lower than like Metcalf and Lockett. Firmly in play for me. No issues with Waller here. And then we do need to talk about Matt Breida. So Matt Breida last week, was not very efficient on the ground and did not get a ton of opportunity, just 7 touches, but he did find the end zone. He did put up double-digit DK points. But what really stands out is that last week, without Saquon Barkley, Matt Breida did play over 80% of the snaps. He played 82% of the snaps last week. He was on the field for a large majority of the game. I think Gary Brightwell got a lot of snaps. I think a lot of those snaps for Gary Brightwell came kind of at the end of the game when it was out of hand. So if this is a competitive game, we could see Matt Breida play 80+% of the snaps. Now, Matt Breida at this point in his career is not that good of a running back, I don't think. He's not the most efficient runner. But I think the opportunity is going to be there. I don't really think they want to play Gary Brightwell a ton. Eric Gray didn't even see the field last week. So I think Matt Breida is kind of going to be the clear lead back for the Giants here, while Saquon's out. And at 6,400, that's pretty cheap for a running back that probably projects to play 75-80% of the snaps and see anywhere from I would think 12 to 15 touches. So I'm very interested in Matt Breida here. Obviously, last week was a really tough matchup against the 49ers. This is definitely a softer matchup against the Seahawks. So at 6,400, I do like Breida quite a bit here. I think he is a pretty strong play at that price tag. And then we can start to talk about some of the value on the slate. And this is a slate that actually does give us some decent value. So we have these Giants receivers who are all kind of cheap. You got Isaiah Hodgins is 5,800, Darius Slayton's 5,200, and then you got some other guys down here like Wan'Dale Robinson 3K, Paris Campbell 2,800. We'll start off and talk about Hodgins and Slayton first. These two guys have kind of been operating as the clear wide receiver 1/2. Slayton has been kind of the wide receiver 1 if you just look at playing time and if you look at the targets as well. His targets have been pretty consistent. 5 targets in week 1, 6 targets in the last 2 games. Had 6 targets against San Fran and then 6 against Arizona. Kind of similar to Darren Waller, like we haven't seen Slayton really do much in the box score. Like he hasn't really had a big game yet, but the opportunity has been there, and he has been playing a good amount of snaps. The last 2 weeks, he's played at least 82% of the snaps. So I'm very interested in Slayton here as a value option. I think he's one of the better value plays on the slate. I don't mind going to Hodgins either. I think Hodgins will definitely come in with lower ownership than Slayton. I think Slayton's going to project better, and Slayton is also cheaper than Hodgins. So for that reason, if you want to like pivot off of Slayton in tournaments and play a lower owned Hodgins, I think that's fine. For cash games, I would probably go to Slayton because I think he's just going to project better and he's cheaper. But Hodgins is going to have a pretty decent role as well. He's going to operate as the wide receiver 2. He should play 60 to 70% of the snaps and probably see at least like 4 to 5 targets. So he's fine at 5,800 as a GPP option. Then we'll talk about Jackson Smith and Jigba. So a lot of people were kind of hyped about JSN heading into this season as operating as the wide receiver 3 for Seattle. He's yet to really do much though so far in the regular season. The targets have been okay. He hasn't seen a ton of volume, but he did get 6 targets in week 2. He got 5 targets in week 1. In terms of playing time, JSN's been playing about 50 to 60% of the snaps pretty much most weeks. 59% in week 1, 56% in week 2. Last week, 44% of the snaps. When you're talking about this Seattle passing offense, the target share is so condensed around Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf that it's going to be hard to project JSN for a ton of volume. But he is a talented rookie. We saw him play well in the preseason in the time that he did get on the field. He is kind of cheap. I think he makes some sense as a value play. I think he does carry kind of a lower floor, but the ceiling I think is there. Like I wouldn't be surprised if at some point JSN has a big game and puts up like 50 plus yards and a touchdown. Maybe this is the game where that finally happens. At 5K, he's an okay value play. I think he's probably going to project worse than the Giants wide receivers. So he's probably more of a tournament play, but if you want to go to JSN for tournaments, I don't hate it at 5K. The kickers on this slate I think are fine. Myers is 4,600, Gano's 4,200. I have no issue with either kicker. I don't know if this is a slate where I would play both kickers in the same lineup because I think we do have enough good position value. Like we have enough skilled position value. We have enough cheap wide receivers that are in play that I don't think this is a slate where you need to play both kickers. But one of the two I'm totally fine with. Gary Brightwell, he's going to operate as kind of like the backup to Matt Breida. Like I said, last week he only played 18% of the snaps. He only played 9 snaps. So it's hard to feel good about Gary Brightwell. It seems like they really want to play Matt Breida as the RB1 right now, so I just don't know if there's enough opportunity for Brightwell. He's playable, I guess, at 4,800, but not someone that I'm super excited to roster. The defenses on this slate, I don't love either one. If I had to pick a defense, I think I'd go with the Seahawks just because we have seen Daniel Jones have games where he's just really bad, turns the ball over, takes sacks. But the defenses are expensive enough to where I think it would just make more sense to play some of these wide receivers that just offer more upside than the defenses do. Defenses tend to be over-owned on these showdown slates anyways. I don't think this is a slate where I'm super interested in either defense. And I do want to talk about some of these other cheap pass catchers that we have. So we got to talk about the Seattle tight end situation. Heading into this game, 2 of their tight ends are both questionable. Noah Fant and Will Dissly are both questionable for this game. The Seahawks, they have kind of been operating with 3 tight ends this season. In week 1, when weeks 1 and 2, when all 3 of these guys were active, Fant, Dissly, and Parkinson, they all got playing time. Now, last week, Dissly was not active, and it was Parkinson that actually played the most snaps. He played 71% of the snaps. Noah Fant played 63% of the snaps. If Fant and Dissly are both active, I don't really love any of these Seattle tight ends because they're just going to run kind of like a 3-man rotation at tight end. And you're kind of just like, you're picking at straws here. You're kind of just hoping to catch lightning in a bottle. I feel like all these guys are kind of like touchdown or bust. Fant, I think, is the best pass catcher of the 3. He didn't get targeted in week 1, but he did see 4 targets in week 2, and he got 5 targets last week. Ever since Fant got traded to Seattle, he hasn't really done much as a tight end, but he has shown promise. And when he was on Denver, he did have some good games with Denver. He's okay at 3,600, not someone that I love on this slate, but I think he is playable. And then Parkinson, he's been getting a decent amount of playing time, and he's been seeing a couple targets. Again, I think all these guys are kind of touchdown or bust, but Parkinson is super cheap, $800, and then Will Dissly's also super cheap, $400. Last week he did see, or week 2 he did see 3 targets. Week 1 he got 2 targets. I think where it becomes really interesting is if some of these guys are out. So like, let's say Noah Fant is out, and let's say Will Dissly's out. If both those tight ends are out, that basically leaves Colby Parkinson as the clear tight end 1 for the Seahawks. And if that's the case, like if there's no Fant and if there's no Dissly, I think Parkinson is one of the best value plays on the slate, just because he's going to be like an every down tight end. He would probably project to see 4 to 5 targets, and he's only $800. He's going to be a really, really good value if Fant and Dissly are both out. If let's say Fant is out and Dissly plays, then I think Parkinson and Dissly would both become viable. I would probably prefer Parkinson there. And then let's say Dissly's out but Fant plays, well then I think Fant probably sees a little bit of a boost in playing time if there's no Dissly. So these tight end injuries with Fant and Dissly both questionable are actually kind of important. If they all play, if all the tight ends are active for Seattle, I don't love any of them. I think my favorite would still probably be Parkinson, maybe Fant. Like, it's just so close. I think all these guys are kind of touchdown or bust if they're all active. But if some of these guys get ruled out, like if Fant gets ruled out, if Dissly gets ruled out, then that's where it becomes really interesting. That's when a guy like Parkinson becomes a really good value. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that Seattle tight end situation. It is pretty important for this showdown slate. Let's talk about a few more guys before we wrap up this video. So you have this Charbonnet guy. I don't know a ton about him, but he has been backing up Kenneth Walker this season. He's been efficient with the touches he's gotten this year. He's not going to project to see a ton of opportunity. He'll probably get 6 to 8 touches, probably 4 to 5 carries and maybe a couple targets. Nothing more than like a dart throw at 3,400. Not super interesting to me. And then Wan'Dale Robinson did make his season debut last week. Didn't play a ton of snaps last week. He only played 11 snaps, but he did get 5 targets. So when Wan'Dale Robinson was on the field last week, he was running routes and he was getting targeted. Given that was his first game back from, I think it was an ACL injury that he suffered, like given that was his first game back, you would think he probably gets a little bit more playing time this week. Like I think at this point, Wan'Dale Robinson's probably the wide receiver 4 for the Giants, maybe 5, depending on how they view him and Jalen Hyatt. Last week it was Hyatt that outsnapped Robinson, but again, Robinson played his first game back from an ACL injury, so maybe they just kind of wanted to take it easy on him. If they decide to give Wan'Dale Robinson more playing time this week, I mean, he did earn 5 targets last week. I think at $3K, he's kind of interesting for value. Like, I do have some interest in Wan'Dale Robinson here. And Paris Campbell's been operating as like the wide receiver 3 for the Giants. Again, another guy that has yet to really do much in the box score. But if you look at the last 2 weeks, he has been able to get 12 targets over the last 2 games. He's been playing about, anywhere from like 50 to 60% of the snaps. Last week, his snaps did go down to just 42%, but the 2 weeks before that, 67 and 66% of the snaps. Maybe with Wan'Dale Robinson back, maybe Campbell starts to lose playing time, but he was still able to earn 6 targets last week. He's really cheap. I'm fine taking a shot on him. Like, I don't have a strong stance when it comes to these Giants wide receivers, but all these guys I think are viable. Like Robinson, Campbell, Slayton, Hodgins. Again, I think you're kind of hoping you just land on the right one. I don't have a strong take when it comes to these Giants wide receivers, but they're going to rotate probably 4 or 5 guys at wide receiver, and you just got to hope that you play the right one. I think for me, my favorite still is probably Slayton. Then after Slayton, I think it's probably Campbell, then Robinson. Hodgins, I would like more if he was cheaper, but at that price tag, it's tough to have a ton of interest in Hodgins. But yeah, I definitely think Robinson and Campbell are both in play. Jalen Hyatt is probably just like a boom-bust GPP play. He did have a solid game in week 2 because I think he caught like a really long pass. He's not gonna demand a ton of volume, but he does have big play upside. If you want to take a shot on him like in the Millie Maker at 2K, I think that's okay. But that's pretty much it. Like, I think we kind of talked about all the playable options. I don't think there's really anyone else worth mentioning. Sterling Shepard, he's been like the wide receiver 5 for the Giants. He's minimum salary, but I still wouldn't play him. I mean, last week he only played 2 snaps, so hard to feel great about Sterling Shepard. Just clearly not getting the playing time right now. Daniel Bellinger, obviously now that he's backing up Darren Waller, like he's not going to have much of a role. Last week only got 1 target, not a ton of interest in him. So I think that's it, guys. I think we talked about all the playable options on the Showdown slate, and I think we broke it all down. So hope you guys, as always, enjoy these videos. I hope they do help. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you hit that like button down below. Hit that subscribe button as well if you have not yet. And lastly, guys, before we wrap up this video, be sure to go check out PrizePicks. If you're not signed up for PrizePicks yet, sign up. Use that promo code NOAH. When you do, you will get your first deposit matched up to $100 when you sign up for PrizePicks with my promo code. And as always, I will be sharing a couple plays that I like on PrizePicks for this Monday night game. I'll be making a separate video that I'll post later tonight, sharing some plays I like for Monday Night Football. So check out that video if you're going to be playing on PrizePicks and want to know some props that I like for this one. But good luck tonight, guys. Thanks for watching the video as always and supporting the content. Appreciate you guys a ton. We will see you in the next one.